Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to bring you guys the absolute best design Hearthstone cards to date. So it's all the wild cards, even cards designed 5 years ago and all that. I thought I'd give you guys this video to inspire you with the awesome creations that have come out of the Hearthstone department over the years, as we are pretty soon going to be in card reveal season full swing. And as I was making this video, after the fact, Rania told me, it's like, well, didn't you actually do this video already? And I kind of rung a bell, but you guys know, we do like 2 videos a day for years now. We've been on YouTube for about a decade now. You know, it's been a lot of videos. And she was right, I did make this video, but it was over 3 years ago where the game was completely different. And even though some cards I realized were on that video as well as this list, there's a very different context. And, you know, they're up against much higher competition, of course. So I thought you guys would love this video. So here we go. A few honorable mentions before we get started. Reno, Jackson, along with Jaraxxus and all the rest of the singleton deck formats. I want to give it an honorable mention. It is a good design, but it ended up not being quite the funnest decks to play against. It turns out that when you have a deck just full of singletons, your opponent's best strategy is to play around nothing, because most likely you won't have the perfect answer because you don't have duplicates in your deck. So even though these decks are fun to play, the counterplay to them is very one-dimensional, so they kind of slipped out of the top 10 list for me. I also wanted to give you guys Echo of Madiba as part of my top 10, but kind of realized that it's never really been used in like honest ways. You know, often in Arena you'd get just that really cool Echo of Madiba value, just a fair, really cool way to extract value. But in terms of constructed play, it's just been the core of Exodia mages. And while I like Exodia mages, I can't say that cards like Sorcerer Apprentice, which are the only reason why Echo of Madiba is even played at all, is particularly good card design. So that's why it gets an honorable mention. Now to the top 10 list, these are not in any particular order, though I have to say the last one is actually my favorite. So maybe it is a little bit of a ramped up order, but nonetheless, first card on the list, best design cards ever. I have Astral Communion. So yes, there is an aspect to Astral Communion that, you know, some people don't really like, and that is the high roll aspect. That is, you play Astral Communion and you get, like, you know, an innervate with the coin, and then you get that out, and then your opponent can't do very much because you're drawing really heavy minions. But that's kind of like the nature of the high roll draw in Hearthstone, and if you compare that to any aggro deck at like almost any time in Hearthstone, it's honestly not even as bad as the aggro decks. You know, if you're just playing a really tier 1 top-end aggro deck, 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, you're just pushing your opponent out of the game no matter what. And that includes even the Astral Communion nut draw most of the time. The reason I love Astral Communion is because it single-handedly created a deck type that was actually pretty good. I think in some points it peaked in tier 1 for very limited times, but we've seen it in tournaments. We've seen people have very good success from this deck type, and it's just a very fun deck type that utilizes a whole lot of cards that are otherwise not used. It's a card that brings up like 10 other gigantic legendary minions that otherwise see no play whatsoever. And more than that, it's just a lot of fun to play. Yes, there are a few of those frustrating games, but if you compare it to the, you know, base design of aggro in Hearthstone, it's not even as bad as that. So Astral Communion absolutely makes the list. Then I have Kunai Sol Priest, a returning favorite from the original video. Kunai just does a wonderful thing where not only does it convert all the heal cards, not only does it make a lot of cards that are otherwise very useless, because cards that just heal and do nothing else are certainly very useless in competitive constructed formats. And yeah, it just makes use of that. But there is the other aspect that I really love. It's not often highlighted in constructed as much as it is in Arena, but what happens is if you see an Kunai Sol Priest on the other side of the board, you're basically given 2 decisions. Do I take the risk and see how much damage my opponent can convert and deal to my face, or do I leave it up intentionally play cards that don't have 5 attack and try to swarm my opponent down because he can't actually heal himself when Kunai is on the board. That notion just kind of elevates the card and puts it in the top 10. Once again, boys, once again, it's just a magnificent card where there's so many gameplay changes that happen when the card is not only included in a deck, but eventually played. Defile. Of course, there's not much that needs to be said about Defile. Yes, it is kind of overpowered. Yes, it is kind of oppressive in some ways. But Defile encompasses a card type that we don't see a lot of the time in Hearthstone. It's the card type that is generally extremely good when played by a good player, and generally not so good when played by a poor player. Cards like Defile are so core to the game that I think we just need 1 or 2 of them in every single expansion to kind of give people a reason to practice these decks, to practice these cards, to get better at Hearthstone. I don't like the gameplay in Hearthstone that is, what is the best aggro deck? How much face can I go? I know there's a lot of skill in like the aggro versus aggro matchup that both players get a really good draw, but in like most of the games, not exactly that. You know, there's not really that high of a skill ceiling in most games. But cards like Defile single-handedly separate the good players from the mediocre players, and I love that. We need more of this, Blizzard, please. Another Warlock card, once again, returns to the list. Lord Jaraxxus. Lord Jaraxxus was on the original list. It's just an awesomely designed card. Of course it is. No one has ever denied that. But now we have a lot of context. Since I made the last video, we have, well, Knights of the Frozen Throne. We have like random hero cards popping up roughly once per expansion. And to compare it to basically all of those, it's still the only hero card that is pretty good, that kind of complements the base design of the Warlock class, which is your hero power is really good, but eventually it's literally useless when you don't have much of a deck, right? So it's just perfectly complementary to the Warlock class, but it always has that cost. In Hearthstone, there's always been combo decks. There's always been burst, even from like mid-range decks, even from aggro decks, of course. So being at a cap of 15 health always is going to make the card fairly balanced. It's never really going to be out of control because 15 burst damage is just achievable in just about every single meta. So even if you play Jaraxxus and you get all the value you dream of, you're still at risk of dying every single turn in that game. If you compare that to like all the other Death Knights that you play when you're at like 30 health and it's like, oh hey, the game now is just going to be extremely unfair for you. So, you know, it's extremely different. The fact that the HP is capped and it's that high risk, high reward aspect, it's beautiful. Next up, Frothing Berserker. Much like Defile, I had to include this card on this list as, yes, you know, when we had Grim Patron and we had like the whole math thing and then the charge thing, it was a bit of an oppressive card, but now with Warsong Commander nerfed, we still see the fairly unusual, but still we see the Frothing Berserker, and anytime there is an aggressive warrior, anytime there's a mid-range warrior that comes into the meta, Frothing Berserker is literally the first addition to every single one of those decks. And it is much like Defile, where players that are very skilled at the game, that are capable of understanding how many different mechanics work, are capable of, crunching some numbers within a fairly limited time, planning their turns out, playing minions they shouldn't just so they can get higher Frothing Berserkers, making unintuitive trades, and leading ultimately to lethals that weaker players are not going to be able to perform. We need more of this, Blizzard. Frothing Berserker is where it's at. Supercollider, a recent addition to the Hearthstone pool from the last expansion. It's just, yes, it's kind of an overpowered card, but I just love it. I love the play and counterplay. You know, your opponent can constantly play around Supercollider. If they want, they can just play one minion at a time. But they always have to consider how much of a cost that is to, well, winning the game. Because ultimately you have to win the game. And a lot of decks kind of need to play multiple minions. So if you have to play multiple minions, how often is your opponent who's playing a warrior playing Supercollider? How likely is it that he has it right now? How do you have to manage your board? How suboptimal do you have to play around Supercollider at all times? Or how punishing is it? Or do you need to take that risk to actually beat your opponent before he can out-control you, regardless of whether he has Supercollider or not? You know, all these questions get asked, but from the other side of the board, if you are the warrior player with Supercollider, you're asking a different set of questions. How much removal do I need to actually save in order to punish my opponent who seems to be playing against Supercollider? A lot of the time, players will play two large minions on opposite sides of a very wide board in Hearthstone to play around Supercollider. So, you know, maybe it's worth it to save a board clear. Maybe it's worth it to save many small removals or to kind of push on the board constantly to always be able to threaten with your super colliding attacks. A lot of good stuff. Coldlight Oracle makes the list. Once again, not much needs to be said, but there is a lot about this card that I love. I'm kind of sad to see it in the Hall of Fame now. I understand it. It is fairly design limiting in a way, but at the same time, it's just so much fun to play. It's so much fun to mill your opponent. It's so much fun to just draw extra cards. It's the ultimate balance. Your opponent gets cards and you get cards, but you get to design your deck entirely around the card, and it's a neutral card, so you can literally do that in every single class. If you want to play a super combo deck, combo is weak to aggro. So yes, it might be the best way to draw in a combo deck, but you might actually compound your chance to lose against aggro while playing Coldlight Oracle. There's just so much about this card I love, and honestly, if you've been a Kripp fan over the years, you've seen enough of this card in my videos to know the details of why. Deathlord. Deathlord makes the list. It is the original combo disruptor. I took a look at a lot of cards that disrupt combos because they're very essential to the game and they're very fun to play sometimes, but a lot of them feel kind of unfair. You know, if you think about Dirty Rats or maybe some other combo disruptors that we've seen lately, they're kind of active. There is not much counterplay, and yes, one could be said that there needs to be just some direct counterplay to combos, but I disagree. I think often enough Deathlord does the job. If you are playing against a combo deck, you can even play Deathlord and find a way to kill Deathlord on the same turn, at the same time killing your opponent's minion-based combo piece that pops out of his deck. It is the original combo disruptor. It took a long time for people to realize that fact, but now that they have and the card is in wild, it does literally do very wild things, and it's very entertaining to see the cards fly. Alina Soul Thief makes it on my list. Yes, not everyone likes to play or play against Togwaggle Druid. That is where I learned the true power of the card. Personally, I love playing Togwaggle Combo Druid, so that is one of the reasons why it's on the list. It offers such a different type of gameplay experience that I think absolutely everyone who's a Hearthstone enthusiast should try. But on the other hand, since the rise of Togwaggle Druid decks, we've seen Alina be included in a lot of control lists, particularly in a lot of odd warriors, a lot of odd decks. It's a card that fills the role of you don't want to have card draw. You want to have a very heavy deck, a very slow deck, but you still need to generate cards. And most classes can't do that, so Alina offers the perfect opportunity to play against other control decks while not having to draw cards and not throwing the fatigue game. It offers such a unique experience and just such a crazy play in a lot of the games that I've seen that, again, it has to make the list. Finally, 10th. Maybe the best, certainly the main thing that kind of completed my Hearthstone experience a few years ago, Cthun. Man, do I love Cthun. The reason why Cthun is great is maybe not in the decks that he's been able to produce. Yes, we've seen some competitive Cthun decks, but we've literally seen Cthun flourish in just about every single class, and every single class's Cthun deck at the time had a chance to beat literally every other deck being played at the time. And it just offered that point of accessibility for the new player, for the casual player, or for someone like me who just doesn't play Constructed every single day of every single, Hearthstone expansion. Yeah, I play Constructed for like about a month. I want to check out all the best decks. I hit up Legend, maybe in Standard, maybe in Wild, maybe both. But, after that, the meta has settled. It's not that interesting for me. Just play Arena, my main game mode. With Cthun, it was different. I played Constructed through and through the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion because I could just basically put Cthun in almost any deck that I want, and none of the cards are overpowered. Just Cthun kind of made it work and offered that win condition to play alongside basically whatever you wanted to do at the time, and because most of the cards were low rarity and Cthun was free, everyone else playing Hearthstone at the time was able to do the exact same thing. So Cthun, the best, boys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I've missed some of the important cards. Let me know if I've missed some of your favorite, some of the best design cards that you think should make the list. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.